Welcome in to the Valor Knights 2025 Varsity Football Season Wrap-Up Show, where today I, Ben Brown, will be recapping every game the Knights played this season through the stats, moments, and memories on the field this year. We will begin with the Knights' first game of the season, where they took on the Prince of Peace Eagles from Carrollton, Texas. Let's now take a look back at the drive chart and all of the scores from the contest. With their first drive of the game and of the season, Valor started off strong, with Bear finding one of his favorite targets, Connor McFarling, for the touchdown. The PAT attempt would be missed, however, keeping the score at 6-0. Prince of Peace would answer on their next drive as they would drive down the field and score their first touchdown of the game via the pass from Trip Wilcoxon to Chad White. They would also miss their PAT attempt as well, knotting the score up at 6-6. Valor got the ball back and proceeded to march down the field, once again capping the drive with another passing touchdown. Matthew would convert on his PAT this time, moving the score up to 14-6. Valor in the lead. Prince of Peace's quarterback, however, did not take well to that touchdown and led his unit down the field, ending the drive with a passing touchdown to Hayden Hudnall, and Drew Mages would get the ball between the posts for two more to tie up the score at 14 apiece. Bear would respond, though, finding Duke for 6 more points, and Matthew extended the lead with his leg, making the score 22-14, Valor in the lead. In this back-and-forth affair, however, Trip Wilcoxon threw for his third passing touchdown of the night on the ensuing drive, finding JoJo Sapala for 6, and Mages made the 2-point try. That meant the score was tied once again, giving the feeling that whoever got a stop first may win this game. The Knights would not be denied their next trip down the field, however, once again getting Parker Jones involved. This would be PJ's first rushing touchdown of the game. When they made PAT, the Knights were feeling good again, holding an 8-point lead at 30-22, a little beyond the midpoint of the second quarter. Prince of Peace would answer shortly, though, with their QB finding Brody Newland for his first touchdown reception of the season, bumping the score up to 30-28 with a botched PAT attempt by the Eagles. That would be the score at halftime, and coming out of the locker room, the Eagles would find Newland once again for 6 points, plus 2 more on the following 2-point kick. Valor, trailing for the first time in the game, would find their groove, though, with the next drive, as Bear found Bennett Herman for the touchdown. That bumped the score up to 36 all, and Matthew took the lead right back with 2 more, making it 38-36 Knights in the third quarter. The Knights would recover an onside kick, and Bear would pass for his 5th touchdown of the game, this one to Duke. However, they would miss the kick, keeping their lead at 8 points. Cannon Smith, though, would check into the box score as he would give the Knights another 6 on a scoop and score off of a Prince of Peace fumble forced by James Hoagland. That would indeed prove to be the deciding factor in the game, as the Knights would make the score 52-36 with a successful 2-point kick. However, the Eagles were not done yet, as Trip Wilcoxon would find Brody Newland once again for 6, with the made PAT to cut the lead to 8. Valor responded, though, with Bennett's second receiving touchdown of the game on the throw from Bear. Matthew would make the PAT once again, making the score 60-44. Unfortunately, Prince of Peace would answer with 8 more, courtesy of Wilcoxon to Newland for 6, and Mages 2 more. Now, late in the fourth quarter, a Valor touchdown would likely secure the win, but a Knights fumble let Prince of Peace back into it. The Eagles would score with about a minute left and tie the game at 60, leaving the Knights very little time to score, but that is exactly what they would do. Bear would find Connor for his second receiving touchdown of the night to give Valor the lead once again. Connor's signature head-top grab would give the Knights all they needed to win 68-60 over the Eagles in regulation. The MVP of the game would be Bear Griesemer, as he threw for 385 passing yards and 7 touchdowns on the night. Also, Connor had 8 catches for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns in the win. Trip Wilcoxon for Prince of Peace had a stat line that rivaled Bears at 302 yards and 8 touchdowns, but ultimately came up a little short. Once again, the final score from Game 1 of the Knights season, 68-60, a win over the Prince of Peace Eagles at Paul Tyson Field. Moving on to the second contest of the year, Valor would play host to their second opponent of the season, the Second Baptist University model, Cypress Eagles. Valor started off hot, and within a few moments, James had scored a rushing touchdown to make the score 6-0 Valor. Matthew added the 2 points with his following kick to bump the score up to 8-0. The defense responded with a stop, giving the offense the ball back in Eagles territory. Ultimately, the Knights would not take long to score, as Seth would score a rushing touchdown about halfway through the first quarter to make the score 14-0. Matthews' 2 more points would bump the lead up to 16-0 with Valor in the lead. Next, for the defensive unit, Bennett intercepted the quarterback to give Valor the ball back and a chance to extend the lead to 3 scores. That is exactly what Valor would do, with Bears passing touchdown to Matthew Schlappe and Matthews' PAT kick. With the score at 24-0, Second Baptist University Model would score their first points of the game via a Caleb Cook rushing touchdown. They would not convert on the 1-point attempt to follow, however, keeping the score at 24-6, Valor in front. Momentum would remain with the Eagles as they were able to force a defensive stop inside the red zone and turn the Knights over on downs. That would wind the game up at the end of the first quarter, with Valor still holding a 24-6 lead. The defense stopped the Eagles on 4th down with a sack, giving the offensive unit another chance to respond. Bear did just that, throwing a screen pass to Duke for a touchdown on the first play of the drive to make the score 32-6. Second Baptist University Model turned the football over on downs, leading Valor to score another touchdown. Connor would throw this one to Parker Jones, who did the rest. With Matthews' missed kick, the score sat at 38-6, with roughly 3 minutes left in the second quarter. Duke intercepted the Eagles' QB on the next drive with about 35 seconds to play in the half, giving the offense the ball back with a chance to score before halftime. The offense did cash in with their opportunity, making the score 44-6 with a Bear passing touchdown to Duke. Matthew made the PAT, inching the Knights closer to a Mercy Rule victory. They even recovered an onside kick but could not score again before halftime, meaning the lead stayed at 46-6 at intermission. Knights defense came out strong on the first drive out of halftime for the Eagles. Aiden Murray intercepted the quarterback, leading to the Knights' next score and last score of the game. Rivers, the third quarterback of the contest for the Knights, found Rhodes Horner in the back of the end zone for the game-sealing score to win. That would make the final score 52-6, with Valor sitting at 2-0 on the year. Valor's MVP of the game would be Duke, as he had an interception, 2 touchdowns, and 3 catches for 74 yards. Another fun fact about these two teams would be that they would both go on to play Faith Academy of Belleville, Allen Academy, and Brazosport Christian later on in both of their seasons. Once again, the final score from Game 2, 52-6, at Valor as the winner. Game 3 would be the first road opportunity for the Knights in their young 2025 season, as they would travel to Bryan to face the Allen Academy Rams. James Hoagland would make sure that the Knights started strong in this one, returning the kickoff for a touchdown to start the score at 6-0 off the jump. A made PAT from Matthew would add on and make it 8-0 after one play. Didn't take long for Valor to get the football back, as Luke forced a fumble on the Rams' first possession. James got his second touchdown on the ensuing drive via the pass from Bear to make the score 16-0 with Matthews' made PAT. Valor's defense stepped up once again on the next drive for the Eagles as they turned over Allen Academy on downs, leading to another score. Duke punched it in on the ground for 6 more, and Matthews' made kick made it 24-0. The Rams would have a high snap on their next drive, however, resulting in a safety and 2 more for Valor. The score sat at 26-0 midway through the first quarter. On Valor's next drive, Bear found Duke for another score through the air, and with Matthews' leg, the scoreboard read 34-0 Knights. Valor's defense kept rolling, recording another stop and setting the offense up again in prime field position. Allen Academy forced the Knights to a 4th down and long, but Bear found Bennett for a passing touchdown to extend the score to 40-0 Valor. Matthew would stay perfect on PAT attempts on the afternoon, adding 2 more to make the score 42-0. Parker Jones would end the first quarter with an interception, keeping the score right where it was. The Knights offense did not let up, however, marching down the field and scoring again via another Bennett receiving touchdown and made PAT. At this point, the Mercy Rule seemed imminent, as Allen Academy was unable to get anything going, and that trend continued throughout the second quarter. Valor's defense forced a turnover on downs, and Bear found his target James for a receiving touchdown. Following that score, James intercepted the quarterback and returned it for 6 more for the Valor Knights. On both touchdowns, Matthew made the PAT, setting the score at 66-0 midway through the second quarter. The Hours defense forced another stop as the backups for the Knights were able to get some run time, and they responded well. On offense, River Ackley found Luke Curtis for another 6, and the 2 more points were added, setting the score at 74-0, which was ultimately the final. With the win, Valor's record continued to climb, this time to 3-0. The MVP of the game would end up being James, as he truly was the all-around star of this contest, with stats on every side of the football. His final stats included 3 catches for 23 yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 1 kick return touchdown, and a pick 6. Bear and Duke also had very respectable stat lines, with Bear throwing for 209 passing yards and 5 touchdowns, while Duke had 2 catches, one of them going for a touchdown. He also had a rushing touchdown in the game. Ultimately, Allen Academy's final record would sit at 3-8, 0-2 in district, and they would miss the playoffs. Once again, the final score from Game 3, 74-0 Valor. For their next contest, Valor had their 3rd home game of the year at Paul Tyson Field, this one against the Garland Christian Academy Swordsmen. The Knights started off the game strong, getting a defensive stop, and then scoring a rushing touchdown via James. Matthew, despite dealing with a quad issue, was able to add 2 more with his leg to up the score to 8-0. The Swordsmen got the ball back and drove down the field before getting stopped on 4th down, and ultimately the Knights forced a turnover on downs. For the Valor offense, James would get his 2nd touchdown of the game, this one through the air from Bear for 6. A bad snap on the PAT, though, would mean that the score remained 14-0. Valor's defense responded great, however, as Connor forced a fumble and Cannon returned it deep inside the red zone. This would set up Seth for 6 as he got his first rushing touchdown of the ball game. Matthew added his 2 points via the PAT, setting the score at 22-0 midway through the first. Garland Christian Academy would embark on a long drive, but stalled at the end of the quarter, giving the Knights the football back. Valor only needed 1 play to score as Bear connected through the air with Connor for 6 more. Matthew added 2 more with his leg to up the score to 30-0 in the second quarter. Valor's defense once again forced the Swordsmen backwards, and the offense checked in again with 6 more points. Duke found the end zone on the ground, bumping the lead up to 36-0 with a missed PAT. Valor's defense continued to shut out the opponent in the second quarter, a week after holding out Academy to no points. Parker Jones would be the catalyst, picking off the quarterback and giving the ball right back to the offense. Bear took it and gave it right back to Parker on the touchdown through the air. And with Matthew's successful 2-point kick, the scoreboard read 44-0. Garland Christian Academy desperately needed points at this point, but they were unable to score as Duke came away with an interception. Cannon Smith would end up scoring the last points of the game other than the PAT from Duke via a rushing touchdown to make the score 52-0. This would cap a dominant 2-game set for the Valor defense, as in their previous contest against Allen Academy, they gave up 0 points and also held Garland Christian Academy scoreless in this one as well. The hot streak even extended back to Game 2, where the Knights held University Model Second Baptist to 6 points. Valor extended their record to 4-0 with this win, as the hope of an undefeated season continued to roll on for the Valor faithful. The MVP of this contest was Duke, as he had 2 tackles for loss, 1 interception, a rushing touchdown, and a made PAT. But the final score was ultimately 52-0, as Valor took home their 4th straight win of the year. Moving on to game number 5 of the 9th season, Valor would travel to the Ovilla Christian Eagles out of Red Oak, Texas. This game would prove to be a good challenge for the Knights, coming off a 4-game winning streak, and six-man football even had the Eagles favored by 17, a metric the Knights felt disrespected by. The Knights' defense, unfortunately, though, was torched on the first play from scrimmage, as the Eagles only needed 1 play to score 6 on a passing touchdown from Caleb Hallmark to Cooper Rogers. The missed PAT would mean that the score stayed right at 6-0 Ovilla. Despite trailing early, Valor responded quickly with a strong drive that was capped off with a Duke rushing touchdown and a Connor McFarling made PAT. With the score at 8-6 Valor, Ovilla Christian got the ball back, but they were unable to do anything with it, ultimately giving it right back to the Knights offense. Following a penalty, Bear found Bennett in the end zone for another 6 to make the score 14-6 as the PAT was missed. Matthew Slappy was inactive for this game for Valor due to a quad issue, and the backup kicker, Danny Smith, was also still hurt, meaning that Connor was relegated to the kicking duties. He was solid for much of the game as the third-string kicker for the Knights. Following the score, Valor would force a turnover on the final play of the first quarter as Parker Jones would pick up a fumble and return it 75 yards to the end zone for 6 more points. Connor would make the next PAT to bump the lead up to 22-6, Valor holding the advantage at the end of the first quarter. On the first drive of the second quarter, Villa Christian would be forced to punt. A rare sight in six-man football, but it was a good one, forcing the Knights to drive a long way for a touchdown. However, Valor would not need long as Bear found Connor for his first touchdown of what would ultimately be a 4-touchdown game for Connor. Connor would use his leg to add 2 more points to the scoreboard, making it 30-6, with Valor opening up a larger lead. The defense would continue to roll as Aiden Murray would intercept the Avila Christian quarterback, setting up Valor's offensive unit in prime field position. Unfortunately, though, Bear would turn the football over via an interception, a rare occurrence for the Valor QB as Max Jenkins picked him off. The interception party would continue as Parker Jones decided to get in on the action on 4th down, giving Valor the football back again. This time, the Knights offense scored via a passing touchdown from Bear to James, extending the lead to 36-6 as the PAT was blocked. Now well past the midway point of the second quarter, Avila Christian would embark on their second scoring drive of the contest as it was finished off with a Cooper Navarro touchdown run. However, with a bad snap, the PAT was no good, meaning the score sat at 36-12 Valor in the lead in Red Oak. That would prove to be the score at halftime as Valor would turn it over on downs and Avila Christian would fumble leading into the halftime break. Coming out of the locker room, Valor's offense started with the ball but had a rare 3-and-out, giving the ball right back to Avila Christian. The Eagles would do the same, with Valor's offense receiving the ball with another chance to extend their lead. Bear, however, threw his second interception of the game, giving the Eagles the football back once again. On 4th down, the Eagles pulled off a big conversion with 4:04 left in the third quarter, scoring a passing touchdown and making the PAT. With the score, Valor saw their lead trimmed down to 16 at 36-20. Avila Christian had all the momentum, but the Knights decided to stop that as they responded with another 6 on a passing touchdown from Bear to Connor. That bumped the score up to 44-20 with another strong kick from Connor, helping out the confidence of the Knights team on both sides of the ball. The defense stepped up right when needed, as Luke Curtis intercepted the Eagles QB and brought it back a long way to set up the offense in great field position with about a minute left in the third. The Knights would go into the fourth quarter with good momentum, seeking a score. That score would come in the form of Bear's 4th passing touchdown of the evening to Connor, making the score 50-20 following the missed PAT. The Valor defense continued to step up, forcing the 5th turnover of the game for Avila Christian and giving the offense the ball back. Bear found Connor for another touchdown, Connor's 4th of the game, and Bear's 5th, extending the Knights' lead to 56-20, a 36-point advantage in the fourth quarter. With Valor zeroing in on the mercy rule, the defense came up clutch once again, forcing a stop near the red zone. However, all the offense could muster was to take some time off the clock as they would turn it over on downs once again. Avila Christian did score after getting the ball back and then cut into the lead to make the score 56-28, and ultimately that would be the final. Some notable stats from Valor players in this game include Bear with 378 yards and 6 touchdown passes, James with 6 catches for 125 yards and a receiving touchdown, and Connor McFarling with 8 catches for 174 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, and the MVP. This would be just the second game of the season. The Knights would not end it via the mercy rule, a rare occurrence throughout the year. Ultimately, in the end, Valor did take the W, as the final score was 56-28. The Knights win. For their 6th game of the year, Valor was back at home for a homecoming matchup against a familiar foe from the previous year, Faith Academy out of Belleville, Texas. The previous year, Valor and Faith Academy met in Belleville and combined for the Texas 6-man record for most points combined in a single game, with a score of 148-112 in a Valor loss. Another fun tidbit of these two teams is that both are the Knights. Valor knew from its previous matchup they would need to start fast, and that is exactly what they did as they capped off their first possession with a Duke rushing touchdown and a made PAT. Faith Academy came out strong with a game plan that consisted of just running the ball down the Knights' throat. The Belleville Knights would indeed finish off their first drive with 6 via a rushing score. However, they would miss the PAT, making the score 8-6, Valor in the lead. Knights were ready for offense once again as Bear answered that score with a passing touchdown to Duke with about 5 minutes to play in the first quarter, including a made PAT. That made the score 16-6. Valor in the lead, and they would continue to hold that lead, forcing a turnover on downs for the Faith Academy Knights and scoring again on offense. That score came in the form of a Bear passing touchdown to Connor, with a made PAT to bump the score up to 24-6. Valor in the lead. With the end of the first quarter looming, the Knights forced another turnover as the defense was rolling to start the game. The rare sight happened on the opening drive of the second quarter as our Knights were not able to score, turning the football over on downs. The defense, however, stepped up once again, recovering a fumble forced by Seth Flowers. This will lead to another Valor touchdown as Bear found Duke for 6 more. Matthew added the PAT, meaning the score sat at 32-6 Valor in the lead. Defense made another big play with Faith Academy driving as Cannon sacked the quarterback on 4th down, forcing another turnover on downs with inside of 3 minutes to play in the second quarter. The offense picked up the defense once again as Bear found Connor for his 5th passing touchdown of the game to make the score 40-6, with Valor with a made PAT. Unfortunately, Faith Academy's offense took flight as they answered with a passing touchdown and a made 1-point conversion to make the score 40-13. Following the mistake on defense, Luke Curtis answered with 1 play for Valor as he took a 75-yard kick return to the house for 6 more. And with Matthews 2 points, the scoreboard read 48-13. That would be the score at halftime with Valor in the lead. Faith Academy got the football back to start the second half, and they were able to score a touchdown to begin the third quarter and make the 2-point PAT. That shrunk the Valor lead to 27 as the scoreboard read 48-21. Valor quickly responded, though, as Bear threw a 6th passing touchdown of the evening, this one to Connor. With Matthews' 2 points, the score was 56-21 Valor. Faith Academy would not go away as they stayed in the game on offense with a passing touchdown to make the score 56-27. With the PAT blocked, Valor got the ball back on offense, trying to score another 6. That is exactly what they did as Bear found Matthew Slappy for a touchdown. With a missed PAT, the score looked like this: 62-27, Knights in the lead. That would be the score at the end of the third quarter as Valor looked to close out the ball game. However, Faith Academy would score another touchdown, ultimately leading to the last score of the game for them. The score was 62-35 Valor, a 27-point lead, but the Knights wanted to extend it, and that is exactly what they did. Seth scored on a trick play, adding 6 more for Valor with a made PAT. That moved the score to 70-35, a 35-point advantage for Valor after forcing a turnover on downs. The Waco Knights unit scored another 8 more on a Bear passing touchdown to James and a Matthew 2-point make. That made the score 78-35 Valor, and the Knights would hold on to win by that margin. A couple of notable stat lines from the game for Valor included Bear throwing for over 500 yards, Duke with 9 catches for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Connor with 4 catches for 126 yards and 3 touchdowns. The revenge that the Knights wanted from the previous year was complete, as the final score was 78-35. The MVP of the game was Bear with his impressive yard total and 7 passing touchdowns. The win meant that Valor's record now sat at 6-0 on the year, an impressive undefeated record heading into a game against a really good team in Jonesboro High School the following week. For the 7th contest of the year, Valor would embark on a trip to Jonesboro, Texas, and Pruitt Field to do battle against the Jonesboro High School Eagles on their homecoming night. Jonesboro, a 1A high school, was ranked 44th in Texas, according to SixManFootball.com, coming into the contest, and the Knights knew they were in for a hard-fought game, although favored by 4, according to the same source. They would face adversity right out of the gate as the Eagles forced a turnover on downs from the Knights, and Jonesboro's offense would go down and score to complement that touchdown as Peyton Martin threw a passing TD to Sam Lawrence in addition to a made PAT. The score sat at 8-0 Jonesboro, a rare early deficit the Knights had not encountered much in the year. However, Valor would strike back as James found the end zone on the ground and Matthew made the PAT to tie the game up at 8-8, roughly midway through the first quarter. The Knights defense would hold against Jonesboro, able to force a turnover on downs and give the offense the pigskin back with about a minute to play in the first quarter. It would not take long for Valor's offense to respond as Matthew took a deep pass from Bear to the house for 6. His kick was blocked, however, meaning the score read 14-8 Valor at the end of the first quarter. This game was also the game where the orchestras of cricket swarmed the lights, bleachers, and broadcaster / his equipment in October in Jonesboro. And yes, a group of crickets is called an orchestra. Despite all of the bugs, Valor's defense continued to thrive as they recovered a fumble from Jonesboro and gave the offense the ball right back. Valor would not take long to score again as Bear found Connor for 6 points plus the 2-point PAT. Jonesboro on their next drive held the ball for a long time and capped off their drive with 8 points via a rushing touchdown and a made PAT. That bumped the score up to 22-16 Valor with about 2 minutes left in the first half. Valor's quick strike offense answered once again as Bear found Duke in stride for another 6 points and Matthew made his PAT attempt. The score ultimately was 30-16, about a minute away from halftime. Jonesboro, unfortunately, though, would answer with a Sam Lawrence rushing touchdown to cut the Knights' lead to 8. At halftime, score sat at 30-22 at Pruitt Field, Valor leading. Valor's defense, though, recovered their second fumble of the night and turned it into 8 points via a Connor receiving touchdown from Bear to make the lead for Valor 38-22 with 9 minutes to play in the third quarter. Next, Jonesboro embarked on a long drive, but were forced to punt by the Knights' defense. Bear took advantage of that and found Bennett for his first receiving touchdown of the game to bump the score up to 46-22 with the 2 points courtesy of Matthew's leg. Jonesboro, however, answered once again to keep the game within striking distance at 46-30 via a rushing touchdown. Valor, though, in a back-and-forth affair, had Bear find Bennett once again for another score to make the score 53-30 with a 1-point conversion. On that 1-point conversion, it was a bad snap, and James threw to Bennett for the singular point. In a game where Valor just could not pull away permanently, Jonesboro would continue to answer with another 8 to make the score 53-38 in the fourth quarter. Momentum would shift to the Eagles' bench as Colton Robertson picked off Bear and gave the ball right back to Jonesboro. Will Featherston only needed 1 play to reach the end zone for the Eagles, and with a made PAT, the Knights' lead dwindled down to 7 as the score sat at 53-46. However, with the game hanging in the balance in the fourth quarter, Valor stepped up big once again as Bear threw a passing touchdown to James Hoagland to make the score 59-46 with a blocked PAT. Once again, a critical moment in the game happened as the Valor Knights forced a huge turnover on downs to potentially seal the game with 5 minutes left. The Eagles could have still come back, but the stop made it a lot less likely. Additionally, Valor's offense was able to take off plenty of clock and score 8 points to put themselves in great position for the final minute and a half. The score sat at 67-46 with Jonesboro embarking on their next drive. Jonesboro did score on their final drive, though, to make the score look slightly better at 67-54. That would hold as the final score in what would prove to be the 7th win of the season for the Knights, as they were still undefeated. Bear had a great game for Valor, in which he threw for 457 yards, 7 touchdowns, and the MVP. James had an outstanding performance as well, with 7 catches for 152 yards and a touchdown, as well as a rushing touchdown and 9 yards on the ground, bouncing back from a lesser performance the previous week. Connor had 5 catches for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Duke had 5 catches for 86 yards, as well as a rushing and a receiving touchdown. Bennett also had 3 catches for 2 touchdowns and 83 yards through the air, as those were the most notable stat lines in the 67-54 win for Valor over a good UIL team on Jonesboro's homecoming night. Coming off a tough contest against the Jonesboro Eagles, Knights would have to make their longest drive of the year down to San Marcos, Texas, to face off against the San Marcos Academy Bears, a team who will be a district foe next year after the Knights move up to TAPS D2. Valor played the Bears the previous year and defeated them by the score 73-47. This time, though, the Knights were looking to try and invoke the mercy rule, 45 or beyond halftime, on another homecoming day for a Knights opponent. Right out of the gate, Valor started strong as the Knights forced a safety on an errant snap to get the ball back, and after getting the ball back, Valor scored their first touchdown of the contest via a passing touchdown for Bear to Connor when they made PAT. Coach Bird always preaches to start fast, and that is exactly what the Knights sure did in this one. After forcing a punt, Bear threw his second passing touchdown of the game, this time to James. Matthew, consistent as always, made the PAT try to make the score 18-0 Valor. San Marcos Academy desperately tried to answer, converting a 4th down on their drive, but ultimately Luke Curtis grabbed his second interception on the year for the Knights, which consequently led to Bear's 3rd passing touchdown of the game to Bennett and Matthew's 4th successful PAT of the game. Valor forced another fumble, but after Cannon recovered it, he fumbled it on the return, giving the SMA Bears the ball right back with a score of 26-0 Valor. The Knights, however, rebounded strongly and forced another punt for SMA to end the first quarter. Right at the beginning of the second quarter, Valor scored another passing touchdown from Bear to James, this time plus the PAT from Matthew. The only score that the Bears would put on the board in the game came on their next drive, as Major Howard threw a 1-yard passing touchdown to Cash Gillen for 6 with Siwoo on, adding the PAT to make the score 34-8 Knights. Valor's offense did not need much time to respond with 6 more points via a Bear passing touchdown. The PAT was blocked, however, making the score 40-8 Valor. The Knights special teams unit made a big play with Cannon recovering an onside kick to give the offense the ball right back. It would be James checking in with another touchdown, this one on the ground, to add 6 more to the Valor lead. With Matthews 2 more points, the Knights' lead was 48-8. With Valor nearing the mercy rule at halftime, Valor did get another stop to give the offense the football back with a chance to score, and that is exactly what they did. With 10 seconds left in the half, Bear found Connor in the end zone for 6 more points to extend the lead to 54-8 Knights. That was the final score in the 8th win of the season for Valor, as the Knights will begin district games the following week. In the Mercy Rule win, Valor had some notable stat lines, as Bear continued his heater of a season, throwing for 241 yards and 6 touchdowns. For contrast, SMA's QB, Major Howard, threw for 141 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. For the Knights, James Hoagland had another monster game once again, with 5 catches for 99 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown, as well as recovering a safety, leading to him earning the MVP award for this game. Connor also had a good game in the touchdown department, getting 2 touchdown catches, and the same with Bennett. In the end, the Knights found a way to extend their undefeated season another week, a common theme throughout the year. The final score, once again at halftime, was 54-8, a Mercy Rule victory in Week 8. In Week 9, the Knights would hit the road once again to play in their first district contest of the year against the Azle Christian Crusaders. This would be the first of 2 meetings on the season with the Crusaders, as a later playoff bout would come to fruition. However, about 5 to 10 minutes before the scheduled kickoff, lightning struck within the radius, and the game's start was delayed about 30 to 45 minutes. Interestingly, this game was supposed to be played on Friday, but it was brought back to Thursday to make sure the game still happened, yet it was still delayed a little bit. Another thing that we knew coming into this game was that it would be chippy, as both sides wanted this game badly, and with only 2 district games, every one counts massively for playoff implications. The Knights started off strong, forcing a turnover on downs for the Crusaders to begin the first quarter. Valor's offense would try to get on a roll as they marched down the field and scored a passing touchdown from Bear to Duke, with Matthews made PAT. That made the score 8-0, but Azle Christian answered with their star player, Griesemer Smith, on a rushing touchdown. They also scored a 1-point conversion to cut the Knights' lead to 1 at 8-7 Valor. A side note on Smith, he finished the season with over 1,000 yards, both on the ground and through the air. For the Crusaders, a great season for him. He probably was also the best individual all-around player the Knights faced all year. Valor, however, was not faced as Bear found Bennett for another touchdown and another 6. Matthew continued to be reliable as he made the PAT, setting the score at 16-7 Valor. The Valor defense continued to turn opponents over as Seth recovered a fumble, setting up Bear to find James the next touchdown, unfortunately with a missed PAT. Azle Christian would not roll over, however, as they responded with a Grayson Smith receiving touchdown. However, a blocked PAT by the Knights. Even with the score, Valor continued to answer, as Bear found Bennett for his 4th passing touchdown of the game with a made PAT to set the score 30-13, Valor in the lead. Valor forced a turnover on downs to set the offense up once again, but unfortunately the Knights would fumble the ball away, setting up ACS to score a touchdown to make the score 30-19. However, feeling the lead slipping away, James Hoagland returned the kickoff for 6 points on an incredible play in which the ball smoked him in the upper body, hit the ground, and then he picked it up and took it all the way. That bumped the score up to 38-19, with Valor holding the 19-point advantage in the second quarter. Connor would extend the lead via pick 6, stopping a promising Azle Christian drive, as it was a massive momentum swing for the Knights to jump the lead up to 46-19 with Valor in the lead. A potential 16-point swing meant that Valor was looking for a huge stop on Azle Christian's next drive, and the Knights were able to do just that with a Seth sack of the Azle Christian quarterback. Bear also found Matthew for 6 more points on another touchdown on his only catch of the day, and his PAT made sure that the score jumped back up as the scoreboard read 54-19 Knights. However, Valor was unable to get a critical stop as Grayson Smith took the kick return all the way to the house for 6 more for Azle Christian, along with their 1-point conversion. The reason that the Crusaders started going for the 1-point conversion was because their quarterback got hurt earlier in the game, and he was also their starting kicker, so Azle Christian just started going for 1. Jackson Durham, the backup quarterback, did fill in admirably for the Crusaders as he threw for over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. The scoreboard read 54-26 with about 2 minutes left in the first half, with Valor still and getting the ball back. Valor would continue to put points on the board despite a blocked PAT. The Knights still added to the lead at 60-26 inside of a minute to play in the second quarter with another Bear passing touchdown. Hazel Christian, though, did score on the final play of the half with a deep passing touchdown to Nathan Tuggle to make the score 60-32 at halftime. Valor in the lead. Coming out of the locker room, the Knights started off strong as Bear found Bennett for another passing touchdown, and Matthew added the 2 more points with his leg to bump the score up to 68-32. In a game where Valor just could not put the Crusaders away, they scored again to make the score 68-38. Valor still leading. Valor once again did score with Bennett's 4th receiving touchdown of the game to make the score Valor 76, Hazel Christian 38. The Crusaders continue to strike back, though, as Grayson Smith scored on the ground to cut into the Knights' lead and make it 76-44. James, however, responded as he found the end zone via a kick return touchdown for the second time on the night. And with a successful PAT, the Knights held a 40-point lead with about a minute to go in the third quarter. Hazel Christian was not done yet as Smith found the end zone on the ground again. And with a made 2-point kick, the Knights' lead was cut to 84-52 at the end of the third. Staying on fire, Valor's offense scored a touchdown once again as Bennett got his 5th receiving touchdown of the night from Bear, and Matthew made the PAT for 2 more. Just into the fourth quarter, Valor held a 40-point lead at 92-52 with Hazel Christian getting the ball back. Momentum, though, proved pivotal for the Knights as Connor intercepted the Crusaders QB and brought it back for a touchdown, though it was called back due to an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after the interception. That would not prove costly for very long, as on the next play, Connor head-topped a defender at the 1-yard line to put the Knights in golden field position to score a touchdown and end the game. That's exactly what they would do on the next play, as Bear found Connor once again for 6 to end the game, with the final score 98-52. Valor the winners. This was the highest point total of the season for the Knights, and with it came some huge stat lines for quite a few players, including a 3-way tie for the MVP of the game. Bear had 422 passing yards and 10 passing touchdowns. Bennett had 5 catches, 469 yards, and 5 touchdowns. James had 6 receptions for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns, along with 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns. Duke also chipped in with a touchdown catch in the game, adding the score up to 98-52, Valor taking home the win. Knights' 10th and final game of the regular season was a district game, another home game for the Knights, though the first and only of the season at Bishop Riker. Knights lost twice to Wichita Christian in the previous season, including the playoff semifinals, and they wanted revenge with that taste in their mouth. Wichita Christian, though, did lose 12 players from the state champs team in 2024 and had 4 players injured in this game. They only had 7 active players for the game, in a game where if Valor won, they would host a home playoff game the following week. With that motivation, the Knights started out strong, forcing a safety, as our broadcast team was busy battling a wasp in the booth. A new feat for us, and credit Jake McCormick for killing a wasp with the spray in the booth. Just another little odd thing about the season for our broadcast team. Following the safety, Valor recovered an onside kick and added 8 more points with Bear's passing touchdown to Matthew and Matthew's 2-point PAT. After Valor recovered another onside kick, Bear found Duke for a touchdown, Bear's 2nd passing touchdown of the game. However, with a blocked PAT, that meant the score sat at 16-0, Valor in the lead. Next, Valor recovered their 3rd straight onside kick and scored another touchdown on a Bear pass to Bennett to bump the score up to 24-0 with a made PAT. Unfortunately, the Wichita Christian Stars did recover the ensuing kickoff, but Valor's defense came away with a stop and extended the lead with a Duke rushing touchdown to make the score 32-0 Valor. The defense continued to shine, forcing a punt, which they would block to then set up a Seth rushing touchdown. At the end of the first quarter, the Knights led 40-0. Valor got a stop on the first drive of the second quarter and scored once again with a Bear passing touchdown to James with a made PAT to make the score 48-0. Valor's defense continued to be one of the better ones in TAP's D3 6-man as they forced a bad snap and recovered it to give their offense the ball right back. Once again, the offense did not take long to score as Bear found Connor for his first receiving touchdown of the game, in addition to a Matthew made PAT. At that point, the Knights were just looking to end the ball game at halftime as Valor scored Bear's 6th passing touchdown of the game following another stop on defense. Rhodes Horner was on the receiving end of the touchdown to make the score 62-0 Valor, a score that would ultimately be the final. The final stats for this game were very spread out as Bear threw for over 230 yards and 6 touchdowns through the air, but the biggest stat of the game was that 7 different Valor players reached the end zone in this ball game. The MVP ultimately was Bear in a big Knights dub. With this win in their district game, the Knights ensured that their regular season record added a perfect 10-0 and guaranteed themselves a home playoff game at Paul Tyson Field the following week. At the time, the Knights did not know who they would face, but ultimately Valor would play Kingdom Prep from Lubbock in the first round of the playoffs the following week. With the playoffs looming, Valor celebrated a 62-0 win against Wichita Christian, following their very successful 10-0 regular season. Knights were rewarded with their first home playoff game of their young varsity program history against the Kingdom Prep Academy Warriors at Paul Tyson Field. Talking with Coach Bird earlier in the week, he said this was one of the better teams in the top six-man D3 playoffs, and the Knights knew they were in for a tough battle coming into the game. And Valor was favored by 44, 1 point shy of the mercy rule by sixmanfootball.com. The Knights, however, did not begin their postseason with the best moments as they turned the football over on downs on their first drive and gave up a passing touchdown to the Warriors. But, like a typical Valor team, they responded. The Knights scored a touchdown with Duke finding the end zone to tie up the game, and then Matthew added 2 more points with his PAT to make the score 8-6 Valor. The momentum did stay with Valor through the end of the first quarter as the defense got a stop and Duke called in a long pass to set up the offense in the red zone. It was an uncharacteristically low-scoring first quarter for the offense, but on the first play of the second period, the Knights scored a passing touchdown from Bear to Bennett for 6 more. Matthews made PAT, made the score 16-6, Valor holding the advantage. Coming off of that score, the Knights got another defensive stop, and Bear threw another passing touchdown to Bennett to bump up the score to 24-6 following Matthews' made kick. Turnovers on downs were a massive problem for the Warriors in this game, as they gave it right back to the Knights for another touchdown pass from Bear to Bennett, the third of the game at that point, and the third to Bennett in a row. That meant the scoreboard read 32-6 Valor in the lead, and heading back on defense, the Knights got their fourth stop in a row, about midway through the second quarter to set up the offense once again in prime position to score. That's exactly what happened. As on fourth down, Bear connected with James for a 1-yard touchdown to jump the score to 38-6, Knights in the lead. At this point, Valor had scored 36 unanswered points to take a commanding lead. Jake and I in the booth wondering if Valor would win by mercy rule at halftime. Kingdom Prep Academy, however, had other ideas as they marched down the field and scored Jacob Farmer's second passing touchdown to Max Cruz to make the score 38-12, Valor still holding the lead. Inside of 4 minutes to play in the second quarter, Bear responded through the air once again to James Hoagland for a second straight receiving touchdown, but with a blocked PAT. The score sat at 44-12. Jacob Farmer, however, found space for his third passing touchdown of the game, this one to Lincoln Riddle. With a made kick, Valor's lead was shrunk back to 24 points. The Knights had a response, however, as a touchdown from Bear to Duke with a made PAT made the score 52-20 Valor, a 32-point lead. Valor's defense continued to roll with big stops when they needed them, though, as the Knights came away with a red zone stand, and then Bear found Bennett for 6 more, plus a made PAT. A bizarre half had finally concluded, as there were only a combined 14 points in the first quarter, but in the second period, a combined 66 points were scored, just an odd stat from the game. The score 66-20 at halftime. The Knights were stopping a score away from winning their first ever home playoff game. That is exactly what Valor would do, as the defense came out on fire to begin the half, getting a stop. The offense did their part to end the ballgame as Bear threw his 8th passing touchdown of the game, his final one to Connor on a slant route to end it. In the win for Valor, Bear had another ridiculous stat line for the Knights as he threw for 417 yards and 8 touchdowns to lead his team to a dub. In addition, Bennett had 5 catches, 4 of them going for touchdowns, another ridiculous number, as well as 152 receiving yards in the all-amazing MVP. Another big statistical day went to Duke as he had 4 catches for 130 yards, 1 receiving touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. James also had 4 catches, and 2 of them went for touchdowns from Bear. All of the stats add up to a 66-20 win in the first round of the playoffs, sending themselves on to the quarterfinals. At the time, the Knights were wondering whether they would play San Jacinto Christian or Greenville Christian, a game that would take place the following day. Valor would eventually find out that they would play Greenville Christian, as the final score from that game was 64-42, the Eagles winning that game. With the matchup upcoming, the Knights would try to continue their undefeated season, now sitting at 11-0 following the 66-20 win over Kingdom Prep from Lubbock. Following their first-round playoff win, the Knights embarked on a short journey up to Irving, Texas, to play at the Highland School, a neutral site, against the Eagles of Greenville Christian. The Eagles came into this game averaging just under 50 points per game on the season, with Valor averaging around 60 per game, setting the stage for a great second-round playoff matchup. The Eagles had not lost a game on the road yet in the year, as all 3 losses had come at home, making this one a difficult game for Valor, even though sixmanfootball.com had the Knights favored by 45, and both teams came out ready to play. Valor won the first drive as they recovered a fumble forced, and it set up the offense in good field position. On Valor's first offensive possession, Bear found Connor in the end zone for the first 6 points of the game to make the score 6-0 with the blocked PAT attempt. Valor's defense kept the pressure up as the Knights forced a turnover on downs to set up the offense once again. Bear checked in once again on the scoreboard with his second passing touchdown of the game via a dot to Bennett for 6 more, in addition to Matthews' made PAT. About halfway through the first quarter, the score sat at 14-0, Valor in the lead. Continuing to blaze on both sides of the ball, Valor forced the second fumble of the game from GCS and capitalized off it with a Connor receiving touchdown, his second of the game from Bear. However, after a slow start, the Eagles did rebound as they scored their first 6 points via a rushing touchdown to cut the Knights' lead to 14. The hot streak could continue for the offense, though, as Bear found Connor through the air for another 6 points. Connor with his third receiving touchdown to make the score 26-6. At this point in the game, it was a back-and-forth affair as Greenville Christian responded through the air with another touchdown and a made kick to cut the score to 26-14, Valor leading. The Knights scored quickly, though, to immediately increase their lead to 34-14 via a Duke receiving touchdown from Bear, along with Matthews' made 2-point kick. Greenville Christian struck with lightning, though, as on their next play they returned the kickoff for 6 points to score 34-20, Valor still holding the 2-possession lead. Following that touchdown, the Valor defense clamped down as they did not allow another point in the game, but unfortunately GCS was able to get a stop on the Valor offense as they forced a fumble out of the Knights offense. Once Valor got the ball back, though, following their defensive stop, Bear scored another touchdown, finding Bennett for his second receiving touchdown. Once the Knights unit got another stop on defense, James found the end zone for his first touchdown of the game to make the Knights lead 30 at 50-20 with about 3 minutes to play in the first half. Inside of the 2-minute timeout, Valor forced an Eagles fumble inside the red zone. To close the second quarter, Valor scored James' second total touchdown of the game, this one of the receiving variety, to make the score 58-20 Valor at halftime, with the Knights getting the ball out of the break. Valor threw an interception before ultimately scoring a passing touchdown from Bear to James to finish off the game at 66-20, Valor moving on to the state semifinals of the TAPS Six-Man D3 playoffs. Some notable stats from the big win for Valor included these. Bear threw for 468 yards and 8 touchdowns. James paced the team in receptions for the game as he had 8 catches for 152 yards and 3 total touchdowns. Next up was Connor with 6 catches for 91 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, and Bennett with 4 catches for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Lastly, Duke had 4 catches for 82 yards and 1 touchdown. Another interesting tidbit was that this was the second straight playoff game in which Valor won 66-20 over their opponent. The huge win meant that Valor would take on either Hazel Christian or Christ the King Cathedral in the next round, and with Hazel Christian's win, it would be a district rematch in the semifinals for the second straight year for Valor, following their games against Wichita Christian the previous year. That meant that Valor was only 2 wins away from a state championship, their ultimate goal following the 66-20 win over GCS. One of those wins would have to come over a team who at that point was a rival from the first time they had met earlier in the season. In the first meeting, Valor took home the 98-52 win over the Hazel Christian Crusaders. Unfortunately, the broadcast quality on that game was not good, so this recap will be shorter than all the other individual games. It sadly was also the last game I was able to broadcast this year, as TAPS holds rights to the championship. On the field, however, Valor knew the power of this game. It was the contest that in the previous season had resulted in a hard loss to Wichita Christian and ended the Knights' hopes of a state title the previous year. With all of that, the Valor's players had a chip on their shoulder in this game, unmatched from any other contest. In the cold and damp conditions of Waco, Texas, the Knights went to work against the Crusaders. The hardest part about this game for Valor was going to be stopping number 0 for Hazel Christian, Grayson Smith, as he torched us in the regular season game, single-handedly accounting for 433 yards in their loss to Valor. In this game, the Knights did a much better job on him throughout the contest, holding him to 219 yards, still an impressive feat for one player. Valor themselves, though, also had some incredible stats in the ballgame, as Bear threw for 9 touchdowns and 471 yards, and James Hoagland, the MVP, had 11 catches for 234 yards and 7 touchdowns, just astronomical numbers, and he actually outgained Smith in total individual yards. Duke also had a big game, hauling in 11 catches for 175 yards, but only 1 touchdown, as Connor and Bennett both also had solid performances as well, sending Valor on to the state championship. With revenge in the rearview following a 77-31 Valor win, the Knights set their sights on the state championship at Waco ISD Stadium the following week. With the Knights in pole position to bring home their first ever state championship in six-man football, Coach Bird preached before the game to his guys not to get complacent with how far they've come, but to keep up the hard and good work. Coming into the state championship, the Knights possessed a sparkling 13-0 record, and they did not want a blemish on that mark. The opponent they would face was Brazosport Christian out of Lake Jackson. Brazosport Christian came into the game 9-3, looking for a win at Waco ISD Stadium. The venue was the biggest stadium the Knights had ever played at, but they handled the bright lights well, as the conditions were cold and damp, not unlike the previous week in Hico. All that remained was to just go out and dominate, which is exactly what they did. Valor played a strong first half, and approaching halftime, they had a chance to extend their lead upwards from 38-6 in the red zone and climb closer to a mercy rule, but credit the Eagles' defense as they came away with a stop and kept the ball game at 38-6 Valor at halftime. The Knights' defense had played well all game, and the halftime period was a well-deserved break. After getting some hot soup courtesy of trainer Tammy Martin, the team was ready to roll coming out of the locker room and into the third quarter. At this point, the strong Valor faithful who had come out to support the team just wanted to see a win. That's exactly what Valor ended up doing. The Knights took possession of the ball following a stop, and Bear had driven his team deep inside opponent territory and set the Knights up well. Bear took the snap, dropped back, and delivered one of his best throws all year, a fade ball to the corner of the end zone. All eyes turned to that corner of the end zone, including mine as I was standing right by the catch on the sideline. And what all eyes saw, ears heard, and voices yelled was a Connor McFarling signature head-top grab over the Eagles' DB for the game-sealing and state championship-sealing touchdown. The team dogpiled in the end zone, celebrating a 51-6 win as fans rejoiced, parents teared up, and coaches hugged. The TAPS D3 six-man state championship was officially Valor's, in only their second season having a program at all. All of the blood, sweat, tears, and toil that all season had led to the next game culminated in Coach Arp handing every player, coach, and broadcaster who had been with the team all year through the lows, though few, and highs. The Knights hoisted the plaque and banner high, those physical objects representing every relationship, every drive, every play, and every practice the Knights had perfected all year to be in this moment. Finally, the title of state champs was theirs, a 51-6 win where Bear threw for 279 yards and 7 touchdowns, finished off the season on the highest note possible, an undefeated season. Throughout the year, every player made a significant impact, whether as a first-team all-district member or as the last guy on the bench, a testament to the brotherhood of the team. With that being said, here are the Knights who won individual awards. For TAPS D3 District 2 First Team, Connor McFarling and James Hoagland at wide receiver, Aiden Murray at center, Bear Griesemer at quarterback, Duke Gaines at running back, Bennett Herman at tight end, Matthew Schlappy at kicker, Seth Flowers and Cannon Smith at D-line, James Hoagland and Connor McFarling at linebacker, and Luke Curtis and Bennett Herman at DB. For TAPS D3 District 2 Second Team, Matthew Schlappy at wide receiver, Seth Flowers at running back, Luke Curtis at utility back, Aiden Murray at D-line, Gaines at linebacker, and Parker Jones and Matthew Schlappy at DB. For TAPS D3 District 2 Honorable Mention, Parker Jones at wide receiver, Sam Griesemer at center, Rackley at D-line, and Moses Barley at DB. For the Waco Tribune-Herald Super CenTex Six-Man Team, Bear Griesemer at Player of the Year and First Team QB, James Hoagland at First Team Wide Receiver / Linebacker, Connor McFarling at Second Team Wide Receiver / Linebacker, Duke Gaines at Second Team Running Back / Linebacker, Seth Flowers an Honorable Mention, Luke Curtis an Honorable Mention, and Cannon Smith an Honorable Mention. In addition to the players, Coach Stephen Bird at Super CenTex Six-Man Coach of the Year, and Dave Campbell, Texas Football Midseason Private School Coach of the Year. The full list of awards will be linked down in the description as well. Once again, all of those individual awards add up to an undefeated season for the Knights, ending in a state championship at 14-0 on the year. In each game, we awarded an MVP to the most valuable player from that game. Here are the final individual totals from those MVPs. Bear had 7, James had 4, Duke had 2, Bennett had 2, and Connor had 1. If you're wondering why there are more than 14, one game had a 3-way MVP. Ultimately, though, Bear is the ultimate MVP of the year, finishing with 4,936 passing yards, 94 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions. That will do it for this recap of the Valor Knights' undefeated season. I'd like to thank all who made this season possible. First, thanks to all the fans for tuning into the broadcasts week in and week out, and for all the encouragement I received from y'all this year. I'd also like to thank Colin Witt and Derek Smith for their help in making the broadcasts come to life this year. Third, thanks to all the coaches, players, and referees and others who made this season what it was. We could not do it without them. Next, I would like to thank my parents for their continued love, support, and help throughout the broadcasting endeavor this season, and Jake McCormick, my color analyst for home games and playoff games. Thank you, Jake, and thank you, lastly, to God for giving me and the team the opportunities we had this season to glorify you. Speaking for all of them, I'm Ben Brown, saying so long for the season one last time. The Knights win the TAPS D3 Six-Man Championship to cap their record at a sparkling 14-0. Armor up, Knights.